Good morning, good afternoon, perhaps good evening. Today we'll be having our fifth session, and we'll only have two remaining sessions. That's why I wanted to give you more time to work on your final assignment. And we will be able today to finish all the contemporary theories, and even we should be able to talk about the servant leadership model. Therefore, you can have next session where we can discuss the final assignment. And then the following session, your eighth session, you'll have the entire week to be working on your assignment. Therefore, you will be able to finalize your final assignment and not to interfere with your next class. Because I started to realize that sometime having this class back to back, even though you now have 8 weeks, I still a challenge. Let's just briefly try to recall what we've discussed so far. As you all know, we are in the sustainable leadership class. And when we talked about sustainable leadership class, we talked about a leadership that is not just effective, but can endure, but that can regenerate, which is really raising the bar very high. And for that, we realize that the leadership is a multidisciplinary, multifaceted activities or exercise, and that we need call upon other discipline. There are other elements that you need to have to be an effective and sustainable leader. That's why we started as any organizational behavior or human behaviors activity. We started with what I call the foundational work for leadership. Before even we try to define it, but we all know what leadership is. And whenever we talk about leadership, the first thing come to mind is influence. How to influence people to voluntarily want to contribute to the achievement or the accomplishment or the realization of a common purpose. And we always hope that that common purpose is for the better good. That's why we discuss in length the importance of emotional intelligence. We visited some of those emotional models. We discussed the importance of cultural intelligence. We even discussed how it is critical as a leader to not just try to control your emotion, to monitor them, not just being aware of other culture, of differences, diversity, but to be able to create your own mood, to create the context, to create what we call psychological safety, where people are eager to engage. That's why we talked about the importance of emotional intentionality. And to do all of that effectively, we always call upon our brain. And that's why we included into the foundational work for senior leader class, we talked about the neuroscience of leadership, understanding our brain, and understanding how those three layers in our brain, the reptilian part of our brain, which is the part that doesn't deal with emotion, doesn't deal with rationality or the cognitive aspect. It just reacts, the one that flight or flee. And then we also talked about the limbic, which is the emotional part of our brain. And we discussed in length about what was emotion and how emotion can differ from feelings, from mood, even for passion. but they do feed into those. Then we completed the foundational work by discussing those three key ingredients, or you can call them pillar for any leadership. We talk about the importance of having the vision and ambition, the importance of building trust, maintaining it and growing it. But most importantly, the importance of understanding the need of your followers and how to motivate them. And we had the chance to visit several motivational models. Among those, you remember we had a very interesting discussion about the hierarchical needs of Maslow, Abraham Maslow. We discussed other motivational model, the theory X and theory Y model, the two model factor, the motivation and the hygiene. And I think that it was where we had an insight that for a long time we assumed that lack of dissatisfaction meant that people were satisfied, which was a big mistake. And I think that many of your classmates were able to elaborate on that and to illustrate that, yes, perhaps we might not be dissatisfied, but it does not mean that we are satisfied. And why is it critical? Because we know that today in the Western world, and even in developing countries, 70% of the workforce is disengaged. Just imagine 70%. The people working are disengaged, meaning they are not really committed or actively committed to the accomplishment of the organizational goals and objectives. Now, if you have only 30% of your workforce that come to work wanted to make a difference, it would be very difficult to raise productivity, it will be almost impossible to innovate. And therefore, your organization will stagnate. And ultimately, that will be the end of that organization. Therefore, as a leader, one of your main roles, after having a compelling vision that people want to appropriate, that people are eager to contribute toward that realization of that vision, of that ambition, that you take the time to build trust, knowing that without trust, people will not commit or will not fully commit. Working real hard to make sure that trust is key. But then, when you are trying to achieve something that is very complex, what we call stretch goals, people will hesitate sometimes. People might be discouraged. And your role as a leader is to inspire, is to motivate. And finally, after finishing the foundational work of leadership, we discussed the classical theory of leadership. We mentioned about the trait approach leadership, where the great man theory emanated, meaning that leadership was seen just as something accessible for just a few of us, that they were born with that. But we had the discussion that it doesn't make any sense, and that the trait theory was so inconsistent, was not able to be validated, which led to exploring as a way of understanding leadership. That led us to the behavioral theory of leadership. And you recall that we talked about the School of Ohio that mentioned about these two dual roles of the leader, what they call initiating structure and consideration, meaning focusing on the process and the system and production, and the other part focusing on the person. At the same time, the University of Michigan talked about production orientation and people orientation. We didn't discuss that, but the University of Ohio, of Iowa University, Kurt Levens, also talked at the same time about the autocratic leader and the democratic leader. And I think it is very clear that you can find those type in the behavior of many leaders. But in terms of the classical theory, we talked about that when we talk about behavior, it's those two schools which led to Blake and Mouton. Because when the University of Ohio talked about initiating structure focusing on production and consideration, they assumed that those are the two roles of the leader. They did not say that they only focus on one area. They just assumed these are the two areas where the leader need to intervene. But they were not able to demonstrate how it's done. Now, the University of Michigan made the assumption that these are two opposite, where you have leaders that are primarily focused on the production, and you have leaders that are just primarily focused on the people. But Blake and Mouton were able to reconcile those two to say, actually, leaders can take care of business, ensure production is done properly on time without sacrificing what I always call the most important capital of any organization, which is the human capital, that it is possible to do those two things. And we did look at the leadership or management grid, where we see the leader sometimes just focused. It's not focused on the people, it's not focused on the production. This is really the absentee leader that we call the laissez-faire SLA. But we have also the leader is fully focused on the production, or the leader is only focused on the human capital. And we see the both extreme were not very healthy. And we have the leader at the middle that tried to reconcile those two. But ultimately, we said the best model was the leader that were able to focus 100% on achieving production objective and goals, at the same time making sure that the workforce is highly satisfied. And from that, we move to the third classical theory, the contingency theory. And if you recall, we discussed the field contingency theory, field contingency theory, which talked about here. The basic assumption is that leaders cannot be effective in all situations. That the ideal case is when the dominant style of the leader fit the situation. That's when you have winner. Unfortunately, in many cases, we don't have that. And Fielder's theory is explaining that there are three elements that will determine the success or failure of the leader. The first thing is the leader-member relationship. What kind of relationship do they have? Is it a very healthy relationship or is it a poor relationship? The second element is the task structure. How complex, how clear, defined are those task structures? Is it well-defined, highly defined, or ill-defined or low-defined? And the third element is the power that the leader yields. Does the leader have power? Is it strong or is it weak? Is the combination of the three factors, depending on the situation, will always predict the success or the failure of the leader. What is good about the Fielder's model? It allowed organization to choose the kind of leadership they have given a certain situation. But as you know, in any organization, it is always, we have crisis. We cannot always predict the future. Today, Many organizations are struggling to meet their performances because of the war in Iran, because of the price of gas is went up. It's been going over 2 months. This was not easy to predict. Now, as a leader, you must, as I say, adjust, adapt, and if need be, pivot. Now, can you, at any time that the situation change and you realize that the style of the leader does not fit the situation, you change the leader? No. That's why we have as a model within that contingency theory that talked about the situation. That's why we talked about briefly the Herscher and Blanchard situational model that basically says that the most important part is to always focus on the need of the follower, to make sure that they are fully equipped. You give them what they need to be successful. And they provided with a model where you started with the new worker does not have experience. You need to direct them, to tell them what to do, and to show how it is done. Now, once they start getting to know what is required of them, starting performing better, you need to continue directing them, but here you need to start supporting them because they're starting to try on their own. Here, you don't need to be harsh. You don't need to be very demanding. You need to take your time to make sure that they build their confidence. And if those that read the book of Blanchard, the 1 minute manager, what Blanchard is saying that when you have a new employee and they are starting to try, keep watching, forget about the mistake they made, but try to catch them doing something right and celebrate that moment, to congratulate them, to recognize their effort. It makes them feel good about themselves. It makes them start trusting themselves. Therefore, they will be more encouraged to keep trying. And if you recall, when we talked about the motivation, or we talked about Victor Broom, the expectancy theory, what it says is that first, people need to look at what is being asked of them and to see if they have the skill to perform the work. That's the first step. If they know they put the effort, will they be able to perform the work? If say yes, then that result, would it lead to an outcome? He said yes, but the outcome, will it be worth the reward? Therefore, what motivates people is A, to make sure that they have the skill set, that their effort will lead to something tangible, and that something will be rewarded, and that reward will be worthwhile. Those were the kind. That's why the situational leadership approach is very in a sense that it focuses on the person. First, direct them. Then, when they started to know what they're doing, you coach them, you support them, you're directing them. Then you see they are at a level where they now confident, they know what they're doing. That's when you start reducing, the support, giving them more freedom to do. You don't direct them anymore, but you continue a little support, but you basically let them do the work on their own. But then you see that they are ready. Then you delegate. As you can see, you cannot delegate if you do not develop your people. As a leader, that should be your number one priority. How to strengthen the skill set of the people around me, how to build their confidence. You get to the point where I stated that you don't need to give them responsibility. They will take responsibility because they are confident, they are skilled, and there's what I always call the psychological safety, knowing that even if I make mistake, I will not be negatively sanctioned. Again, uh, as a leader, you have all these tools. I'm giving it to you just to understand that leadership is a very complex endeavor. Uh, you'll be leading people from different backgrounds, from different culture, having different beliefs, different agenda, different level in their development, in their age group. I said that this is the first time that a leader will be facing 5 generations at the workplace. You still have the older generation, the traditionalists that never question authority, that believe in the autocrat approach to leadership. For them, you have to follow the leader. You don't challenge it, you don't question orders. Then you have the second gen, the baby boomers that were made to believe that if you work hard, you will be successful. You can climb the ladder. And that's what they did. They work hard and they become successful. Unfortunately, because they spend so much time at the workplace, they did not take the time to raise their children. And their children felt abandoned. Their children felt that the parents were missing. And those children become Gen X. And that's the first generation that said, I'm not going to live just to work. I need to live. And they start taking some time off, flexible work time, taking longer leaves to spend more time with their children because they said the way that my parents made me feel, I do not want to say do that to my children. That's why you have the Generation X. I believe that work is just a mean, not an end in itself. Now, those children that were raised by the Gen Xers, that were very balanced, it gave birth to the millenniums. As you can see, the millenniums are the generation of leaders that care about our environment, that bring more about our humanity, that are well balanced, because they had their parents, they were allowed to choose and to grow, to explore. That generation is now leading many organizations. Then you have this youngest generation, the Gen Z, that for them, it's very confusing, that we are destroying the environment. Their education is no longer in adequation with the job market. They're dealing with all this intelligence artificial that is replacing human. And they feel abandoned. They feel betrayed by their elders because they're paying the price for something they have not done. They are very confused. They are very angry. Now, as a leader, if you have those 5 generations, that you need to motivate them, you cannot treat them the same way. Even in this case, equality should be different. We should talk about equity, which is adjusting based on people's need. You don't give everything the same thing. It's a challenge as a leader. And I think that the takeaway from the contingency theory, the situational, is understanding the situation and the level of each person, but also the context in which it is taking place. We briefly talk about the goal path theory, where the leader is like the shepherd leader. You show the way, you equip people, and you remove all the obstacles to allow them to get to their destination safely. That's also part of the situation leadership approach. And today, we'll talk about the contemporary approach of theory of leadership. And you will see that most of those theory, why we're not going to waste a lot of time, by 5:15, I want to go through that. And then we should be able, the next half an hour, to discuss basically, the pillar and the culture of servant leadership. And you'll have all your contemporary theory. And your class should be done by today. Now, next session, we can discuss about your final assignment. And you'll have at least 1 week that you need to use for your sister working on your assignment. Any question, comment, suggestion?
Not a question from me, but just a comment. I really appreciate, Doc, how you have summarized everything that we have done from the beginning. And I actually liked how, I mean, the internal logic in how one form of leadership demands another form. Like you have just demonstrated at the end, talking about the 5 generations that one finds in the workplace. There is a certain internal logic in those 5 distinct groups. One has given birth to the other. And I think the leadership styles that evolve within such setting should not be isolated or exclusive of each other, but there has to be a certain relation complementarity, cognizant of the effect of the dynamics that are within a certain context. Yeah, so that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a very profound. Any other comment? If not, let's just quickly go through the contemporary theories. Now that you have the foundational work, you have the classical theory, whatever you're going to be hearing about leadership is really very familiar. The terminology might be new, but nothing. And as your colleague Abel said, it should make sense. It should really fit. I'm not saying that sometimes it could be sometimes counterintuitive, but if you look at it closely, and because you are a leader, because you are practicing leadership, you can see, does it make sense? Oh yeah, when I did it, you start reflecting. You are your own laboratory. You don't need to go out there to collect data. You can just look at yourself and to look at people around you or to look at your boss. You can test anything, everything we are talking here. If it doesn't make sense, feel free to raise your comment and let's exchange, let's learn from each other. And that's what this class is all about. I said at the beginning, this is the only class that you are an equal footing with, I will not say the lecturer, but the facilitator. I do not know more than you do about leadership. I studied, I read it, but you practice it. If you practice something, you know it. Now let's start with the contemporary period of leadership. I always said it was authentic leadership. And the reason I'll go through the class today, and when we are done, I will hopefully leave enough time where we can exchange. But let's just go through the material to allow you to complete some of your assignment. And again, you'll see that your assignment has not been corrected, graded, because I was appointed a TA a month late. Unfortunately, he got sick last week. And this week he's recovering. I'm hoping that next week I will have the discussion with the office. We'll definitely not only have either he resume his activities or someone else will be appointed. Or in the worst case scenario, I'm just going to have some other late hours to catch up. But make note that for those that have been attending all the classes, you will not be penalized for any late submission. I'll be fine. And that, but for those that are not attending, they better answer the question properly. And but I'm not saying that do not answer questions, but I believe for those that have been attending, you shouldn't have any problem. Because by the kind of intervention that you have been given, I can see there's a high level of understanding of this concept. But even if your grade shows something different, I discussed it with one of the founder, and we will talk with the administrator. Everything that will be corrected by next week, by the end of the by the following week, we'll have everything in order because I will have my TA being operational, and because that we have come to the class, I can spend more time also helping on the grading. Authentic leadership. Uh, we know that it was coined by the former CEO of Medtronic, Bill George. And two of the scholars, Avolio and Gardner, they elaborated on leadership allowed the leaders legitimize leadership. How? Building trust, developing an honest relationship with his follower. Here you see the notion of authenticity is really about sincerity. It's about transparency. It's just being honest. You know, this is one of the scholar, Walumba, defined it as a pattern of a leader behavior that draw upon and promote both positive psychological capacity and ethical climate. As you can see how authentic leadership is very close to ethical leadership. To foster greater self-awareness. We talked about how self-awareness helps with emotional intelligence. An internalized moral perspective. You have a moral compass. There are certain things that you don't do because that's not right, that's not fair, but also a very balanced processing of information, very objective, transparency on the part of the leader to foster a part of self-development. You are always trying to develop your collaborator. As you can see, there are three pillars. First, self-awareness. You have to work on yourself. Self-regulation. As you can see, anything I will be saying will be something new. That's why I wanted to take care of the foundational work of emotional intelligence and ethical behavior. These are the three pillars. They are self-aware, they take them time to monitor their emotion, but they have an internal compass. They have very high moral standard. There are four dimensions of authentic leadership. Just to summarize: self-awareness, transparency, a strong moral compass, balanced processing. But there are five characteristics. And you can see how critical it is in this diagram. The authentic leader, as you can see, has purpose. They know why they're here. They know they have to make a difference. They have a mission. And that will allow to create their passion about what they're doing. Then they have this, and the value base. They have principal values. And those principles always shows in how they behave. But because they believe in the importance of building healthy relationship, that forces them to try to connect with other people, to have social skills. But again, they understand the importance of self-discipline. That helps them to be consistent, which also helps in building trust. But the one thing that sets them apart is their heart. They are very compassionate. You see how that creates really the key ingredient to building trust, to creating a psychological safety environment, to really getting people to commit and to be motivated to give the best of themselves for the achievement of the common purpose. We go now to the ethical leadership. And one thing that for those that are philosophers, you know that we talk about Kant categorical imperative of ethical leadership. You study that in philosophy, and where basically for Kant, there's those rules that should be universal, and it goes to for those that are religious, all those law, you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't steal. Those are some universal, principle. that talked about that high moral character. Then, but when it's come to leadership, when we talk about ethics, we look at it from two different perspectives, from the character of the leader and from the action of the leaders. That's the only way that we can look at ethical leadership. What is the characters of the leader? Does it have high moral principle? And how does the leader is behaving? What are the action of the leader that shows? For instance, if the leader does not respect its word, then we have a problem because his action is not consistent, and that lead to his character. That's why they say the literature on ethics and leadership is 5 key ethical principles. We should guide the leader. But first, demonstrate respect towards follower. You cannot motivate someone if you disrespect them. If you are a leader, and I can tell you by experience, I've been around executive, high level, in the United States. I work for General Motors headquarters. But because they have lived in the West, never been, they never been dealing with people like me because it's a very safe environment. Michigan, they did not really have a great cultural understanding of other differences. Sometimes when I dress ethnic, they might find it funny. Oh, my accent? That's why I've been in the US for over 30 years. But as you can see, I always say that I'm always very proud of my accent. It defines who I am. I'm not going to try to mimic anybody. I will try to speak the language, but I will maintain my accent. Why do I want to lose my accent? Try to sound like someone else. As long that people understand what I'm saying, I don't have a problem with that. It means as a leader, if you disrespect people, they will not commit. And the bottom line, if you don't respect someone, know that they don't respect you. Demonstrate respect towards followers. Provide service to others, support them. Be always just and fair if you treat people differently, which we experience in those places. Because of the color of our skin, we haven't been promoted, or we are promoted because they don't have a choice. They know that they want the work to be done and that we were the most qualified. Display high moral standard. Because if you can say to people, do this, and you do something else, that is the opposite. Commit to building the community. Very logical. Leaders would show respect and consideration to others, foster an environment where people feel valued, just engaged, committed, and eager to contribute to realizing organizational goal. This is what I believe. Now we will go through the shared leadership. Some people will call it team leadership. And maybe here I will spend some time because this is something very practical. There is a model that you can try to use. As you remember, I some time to discuss the Fielder's contingency theory. Here we will exchange on Hill team model, and you'll see why. The shared leadership approach to leadership, first is a team. You need to understand what is a team. It's a big group made of members who are interdependent, who share common goals, or we must coordinate their activity to achieve those goals. Team have an applied function in an organization context. The team defines roles for its member. They have the knowledge and skill required to fulfill those roles. And why is it so important? If you recall, when we discussed management, we said at the time there were like 4 main areas in management: planning, organizing, directing, and at the beginning they used the word controlling. And because that's what they were doing, it was about system, it was about processes. You control, you make sure it is done by the book. Then one of the, what do you do when you care? When you do the planning and you do your strategy, you choose a certain set of activities. Now, those activities, then you need to define what kind of task will be performed for those activities. But those tasks require skill set. And that's why, as a team, you need, that's only at that time you can know that this is the kind of profile that we need, and you bring those profiles. If it's done right, if from the planning status we did it right, and that we organize it properly, we put the right people at the right place, then it is very easy. Everybody will be able to perform their job. But a lot of time we don't do that. We put some people at the wrong place, but also it doesn't matter. It means that you need to find the people with a specific. If you don't know, you can always develop people. You can pair people with more experience. Divide the task. Remember what the contingent theory was saying is that if the leader does not fit the situation, how can you make the situation fit the task? And we look at the case where we just needed to give more power to the leader. And all the board did give more power to the leader to allow the leader to make decision that was able to improve the situation. But here, what we're saying is that, based on who you have around, you can try to divide the task in a way that it is manageable. But the most important thing is to understand what are the skill set that is required to perform the work. And we will discuss Hill leadership model. This is about leading for performance and development. And as you can see here, we're talking the same thing. This is very close to the behavioral theory, aligning, in the structure, the system with developing people. This was developed by Susan Kogler-Hill. This shift the focus from a leader's threat to a leader's function. Because that the primary job of a leader is to monitor the team and take appropriate action to ensure team effectiveness. And effectiveness here means that being able to attain their objective. How is it defined? By both the performance, you see, task, achievement, and the development, the team maintenance, cohesion, capacity. As you can see, the model is inherently diagnostic and action-oriented. That's why I want to spend more time, because you can use that as a tool. It's making it an ideal mental map. Because remember, we as intellectual, as professional, whatever we do, when we have mental map, the same way you have the road and the map, in our mind, you have mental map. And these tools that you are getting here should be part of your toolbox to help you create those mental maps, giving you the ways that you need to go to get to somewhere. For practitioner and researcher, the core mental model is a continuous diagnostic cycle. And that's really the beauty of these tools. What is telling you that you can, there's no step by step, and we saw that in the hierarchical need of Maslow, when he said that you need to achieve the lower need before. Actually, sometimes you might go to higher, you might go to lower. Human being, we are not rational. And I was saying that what makes us great is that we are spiritual beings. And if you try to limit us in these boxes, this silo, it's not going to work. You need to integrate that flexibility. We need to be nimble, to go through loops. There's no linear. It's not straight. Imagine the leader standing at the center of a feedback loop and scanning the team and its environment, looking at what's going on. Instead of a rigid sequence, you have to do A, B, C, D. No, it's not the case. It is fluid, it's interactive. And this is the model for Hill. And what she's saying is that the leadership decision, what do? They monitor, look at what's going on, or sometimes also they take action. or they do both at the same time. How they take action in both areas, task or relation, or both. Remember, Black and Mutton, when the two schools of Ohio and Michigan were talking about task and operation, consideration, and people, they just said no. They can balance both. Oh, we're not operating in a vacuum. Is it something internal or is it something external? As you can see, the internal leadership action are very clear. From the task perspective, about the goal, we need to set up the structure. How do you achieve result? Facilitating decision. Oh, you need to equip people, train them. There are some standards. We need to respect those standards. The relationship. Oh, yes, you need to coach. You need to develop. Collaborating. Of course, there are always conflict, but there are destructive conflict. At the same time, there are constructive conflict. Sometimes having constructive conflict is very healthy. There was an airspace that was destroyed. Which year was it? I don't remember. But when it happened in the United States, they said the mechanical failure was detected at the time. But the few engineers that wanted to raise it to the management, to the leadership, they were put aside. They were thrown because they didn't want to delay the launching, because the launching was supposed to coincide with the State of the Union. For at the time, was it Reagan? Was it the president wanted to talk about the launching of the State of the Union, and they did not want to delay. You see, you have to allow people to say what they think. You should be very open. If there's a problem, let people discuss it. And let's find solution. But we are the autocrat when people fear for their position. But therefore, those conflicts should not be destructive. It should be very healthy to find the right balance. Building commitment, satisfying needs. If people are not satisfied, they're not going to give you the best of themselves. But whatever principle you're trying to generate within the organization, you have to show it, you have to practice it, you have to model it. That's what creates the organizational culture. And what is powerful about organizational culture is that those intangible are actually very tangible. The way that people interact, the things that are not said, some of those psychological contracts, those are important things that you need to pay attention. Then when you look at the external action that the leader need to take, the team leader, about environment, networking, working with other organizations, the government, your other member of the industry, negotiating support, buffering, policy, how do you protect organization, how do you protect your people, assessment, even the leadership, sharing information. These are that would gonna lead you to the team effectiveness into performance and development. As a leader, you always need to align those two. Do not sacrifice your human capital because it's your most important resource within the organization. We talked about that. What a tool for understanding this highly complex team leadership. It is complex. Now, I might, in this case, let's use this case. The cycle start what? Just for you to understand how it works. With the monitoring of the team current effectiveness. The leader asks, is my team performing and functioning well? And you do that every day. If yes, okay, no action is needed. You keep scanning, looking at if there's a gap, the leader moves to a decision frame. Choosing the target. Is it something internal or is it something external? And what is the nature of the intervention? Am I going to be focusing on just the system, the processes, the procedure, task, or is it something related to the relationship, the people? And find the leader deploy a specific set of action from these three buckets. The result of the intervention feeds back into the team effectiveness, restarting the loop. As you can see, those actions will affect either the performance and the development. That's the result. And the development will go back to the loop. uh, to start the scanning. Do we need to start it? And what do we do here? We monitor. That's the first thing. You monitor as an information hub, must gather and interpret the data. That's where we as leaders, we need to be very careful. And as a human being, we need to understand that we have biases. And our biases can lead to blind spot that we miss. And those biases can be the result of our environment, how we were taught, how we were raised, even how we were trained. And if we do not take the time to self-reflect, and I talked to you about the notion of reflexivity, which is to start thinking on the way that we are actually thinking. That's critical. Help us see our biases. Sometimes you are actually with one of your colleagues, ask yourself, am I being objective? Is it based on something true or am I just making it up? Does it remind me about something else or another situation? What does it trigger? Understanding your triggers. Because gathering data and interpreting data is key for making the right decision. This includes the task-related metrics. You have deadlines, quality goals, or the relational indicator, moral, conflict, psychological safety. This is what we call a sense making or taking the pulse, of the situation, of the organization. And this helps to avoid a reactionary activity, which is more like the firefight. Then we move to the leadership decision. Once you do your monitoring and your diagnosis, you move to the decision. Now, when you monitor, reveal a need, phase 3, nested question. Should I intervene, do nothing, proceed, or delegate? At what level should I intervene? Is it internal, within team boundary process, or is it external, the team environment, upper management? And what focus? Is it task or is it relationship? You can see this is common sense, you will say to me. Yeah. But that's what the team leadership do. They shaping the inside, the task action or the relationship action and the external action. This gives you some idea. Here structuring, reclarifying the vision. Sometimes it's just the goals that's not clear. Or sometimes we put remember when we discussed about objective and we said that good objectives should be smart. They should be specific. They should be measurable, but they should be accessible. They should be result oriented, and there should be a time-bound time frame. Do not set unrealistic goals and objectives. You are discouraging your people. If that's the case, you clarify the vision, structuring for result, what the role allocation, the agenda, facilitating decision, concept building, training member in tasks, skills, and maintaining performance standard, the accountability system. Now, in the relationship action, we know that coaching, developing people is key, collaborating, managing conflict constructively, building commitment, and here teamwork, esprit de corps, satisfying individual needs, recognition. I always say during my training, I said the easiest way and the cheapest way and the most consistent way of rewarding someone without costing you anything is recognition. When you recognize someone, that just go a long way. Sometimes it's even higher when you give them monetary. And also allowing people to be autonomous. Because here it's very motivating. And you will see when we talked about the servant leadership, one of the key tests for the servant leader is asking that those people being served, do they grow as human beings? Do they become freer, safer, wiser, more autonomous, and most likely to become servant leader themselves? You see, this whole idea to feel that when we talked about in the hierarchy of need, self-actualization, someone that say, you know what, today I know that I have all the skills that I need, the competencies to really find me the ideal work that I've been working all this time, that give you that autonomy. It's power that give you what we call the personal power, expert and reverence, and modeling ethical principle. Now, when it comes to external action, you manage your boundary. This environment action into the team is plugged into the wider organization or the ecosystem, networking and forming alliance to gain information influence, advocating for the team's interests and representing it outside, lobbying. You know, the other thing is that the government law can change, sometimes might affect your business. You can negotiating upward for resources, time, and support, buffering the team from unnecessary external disruption, like what is happening right now with the Strait of Hormuz, assessing environment shift, market policy stakeholder with their impact, share relevant external information with the team so they can self-adjust. You know, team effectiveness as a dual outcome. The effort is not just a key indicator, performance indicator. There are two criteria. The performance is always the task accomplishment, quality, efficiency, and the development of the team's ability to work even more effective in the future. And again, the difficulty of being a leader is that you are not just managing today, you are equipping your team, your organization to perform better in the future. That is critical. And for those that are familiar with the balanced scorecard, you see, we are balancing the short-term result and the long-term capability. That's critical. Any question? Now, where I am, it's in one of our office, there's a program outside, but let me know if the noise is too loud. Then I might try to find a different spot. But can you hear the noise outside? Okay. Thank you, Abel. All right. Any question? Now let's on two other concepts that are very related are the transactional leadership and the transformational leadership. The first one, as its name says, is transactional. It's just an exchange of resources based on a certain number of commitment we make to each other. And the transformation go beyond that transactional part. It's more like that was loud. it's more like really having a more long-term relationship. Now, the transactional leadership is an exchange of resource between leaders and followers based on mutually agreed arrangement. They reward them for completing a specific task. Such a leadership approach is very short-term oriented and to negatively affect employee morale, job satisfaction. Because here you're not trying to develop the people. All you're trying to do is that you do this and I will give you this. It's just an exchange, you know, very short-term oriented, but yes. Go ahead, Sophia. Sophia? Sophia?
Hi, how are you?
Yes. You want to say something?
I just got here. I'm just
Okay.
gonna say hi and start listening.
Okay. All right. Excuse the background. There are some background music. Hopefully, it will not interfere too much. I try to close my office. Again, the transitional leadership is just an exchange of resource. The reward subordinate for completing a certain number of tasks. But as you notice, here it's very short-term oriented. They're not trying to develop the employee. You come with your skill set, you do what is required of you, and you get paid, and that's it. It doesn't play on the morale or job satisfaction engagement. It's just an exchange of resource. Now, the transformational leadership go further than that, saying that you need to motivate people, you need to engage. And the transformational leadership is really a very transformational activity between the leader and the followers. They kind of interact, supporting each other. And what makes the transformational leadership very powerful is very long-term oriented. You are building the capacity, the skill set. Here, you are trying to achieve common purpose. You are trying to do something great. Transformation, you are trying to make a difference. There's a mission. There's an interaction between the two. And they said that it is based on what we call the 4 I's. The idealized influence. You see the leader as an idol. That's how it's influencing you. And then they said inspirational motivation. Because of who the leader represents, it inspired you, and that becomes a motivation for you. But they said it go further. Because the leader is trying to make you achieve something great, difficult. It will intellectually stimulate you, help you grow as a professional. But the most important aspect of this is there's this individualized consideration between you and the leader. It cares. It makes sure that it nurtures you. It want to help you grow. It want to help you be successful. But as you can see, all of that, the leader is doing it in order for you to achieve organizational goals and objectives. And that's where you'll see the difference between transformational leadership and servant leadership, which go beyond the organization and look at the community as a whole. Downtown was the first one to use the term, but it was Burns that popularized the model, just for your information. It's based on connectedness and interdependency between the leader and the follower. They have a long-term approach, and finally they seek to develop followers' potential, build their confidence, and empower them. As you can see, this is very motivating. And contrary to transactional leader, transformative leaders seek to develop and equip their collective to achieve organizational goals via, we said, idealized influence. They represent something. You look at them as an idol because of what they represent. Remember, we talked about expert power and reverend power. This is how they've been perceived by their follower because of what they achieve. Inspiration, motivation. By setting up a very powerful vision, ambition, that make you want to be part of it. Just imagine you making a medical equipment and your mission, your logo said that we save lives. That's our mission. We save life. Or you go to work and you tell to your wife, to your children, hey, I'm going to work. Guess what? I'm going to save some life today. That's very empowering. That's very motivating. Intellectual stimulation. This transformation leader makes sure that this organization is not, organizational learning new things, but they make sure that you actually is a learning organization, that you are set up to learn all the time, to check your knowledge, to update it, become part of a DNA. We anticipate on new things. We're not going to wait till intelligence artificial come and start taking job away from us. No, we already have set up in a way that we absorb any new technology. It's not about organizational learning, but we are a learning organization. It is embedded in our organization. Not only we learn, but if need be, we unlearn. Because sometimes to better learn, you have to unlearn, because if you don't, it will get in the way. But most importantly, these leaders spend time with each of their followers to develop them, to build their competence, to create this psychological safety. That's very powerful. And by putting the transformational leadership and the transactional leadership together, you have this framework that's been used where you see at the bottom, you see the laissez-faire, we mentioned that. It's not leadership. It's not, it's just watching, not doing anything. But you have the transitive leadership, management by exception, passive. You just sit there, watch you. If they see you make a mistake, they don't say anything. You're done. They said, okay, we asked you to produce 100 units. You're only able to produce 80 units. You are fired. That's it. They're very passive and you're gone. But you have the management by exception, but it's active. They look at you, you need to produce, 100 units. They look at the first 25, for maybe 8 hours. But they look at the first hour and they see that in general, you have not met the quota for that hour. They're not going to wait till you're done to fire you. They're going to start coming and to correct you, to help you accelerate your pace up to that point. They're active. Then you have the contingency reward where they watch you, and if you do it right, that's they come and they pay you and they reward you for it. They just watch you and wait till you do it and they reward you. You've done it, they want it to 100, or they want to pay you $100, they give you a $20 bonus. You're being rewarded. Then you have the transformational leadership. As you can see at the bottom, it's very ineffective because you're not really doing anything for the person. You're not supporting the person. You're not coaching them. You're not guiding them. But then you have the more active role. That's where you have the transformational leadership with the 4 eyes. They influence you because what they represent. They try to motivate you. They always help you increase what you need and they develop it. And they spend time with you. It is a good model to know, knowing that the passive part of this model, you want to avoid it as a leader, and you want to more focus on the higher part. Because it's not always that you are lucky to have people that know what they're doing that can actually outperform. Now, as you can see, we have completed all the contemporary approach to leadership except the servant leadership model. I'm going to pause here to allow you guys to ask questions, to ask for clarification, because all we need is half an hour to finish, or let's continue before the noise increases, because these people, I think it's a wedding that's happening here. Let's finish, then we can discuss it. Servant leadership. And next class, we'll have a time when we go through the assignment. We'll have a chance to talk more about this. Okay. They're testing their mic. Let me just go ask them to give me 15 minutes, and then I will give me just a few minutes to go talk to them.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I was able to buy us another 20 minutes before they start. These are a multi where they do events. And I happen to have an office here that I use when I'm in the city of Dakar. Let's discuss the servant leadership model. And the reason why I don't want to waste a lot of time on this is that you have the books. And again, for those that wanted to know more about the authentic leadership, when you go to the book, you see not only we talk about each of these models, they have a chapter. Not only we define it, if you look at, we defined it in the book, we talk about the characteristic, and we had a section which was one of the reasons why I want to write the book, how to become an authentic leader. Because in many books, they don't tell you. And here I try, again, with a lot of humility, because you don't tell people how they develop themselves, but I just making suggestions, recommendations. You develop self-awareness here. You find a trustworthy mentor. I think there's as a part, we said that you determine your values. You try to lead by example. You improve your communication skills. And finally, I said you find a trustworthy mentor that will help you. We also talk about when sometimes authentic leadership might fail. Because if you said, I want to be authentic, and you're someone that really like to criticize people, and you always, no. So in this case, your authenticity might be something negative. Therefore, that's why you have to regulate yourself. And also, yeah, it is good to be vulnerable, but also if you are in a situation of crisis, and everybody is looking for leadership from your part, and you said, oh, I'm trying to build consensus here. I don't know what to do. You should look scared, confused. No, this is not the right time to be authentic. In here, we want you to take charge because we have a crisis. That's what you need to remember about authenticity. Ethical, we talked about also the definition. And we talked about those three approaches to ethical from a deontologist perspective. We talked about from the value-based protector and from the character-based. And we discussed briefly about the consideration you have, the rules for ethical behavior, integrity, we talk objectivity, professional competency, confidentiality, professional conduct, and how to become an ethical leader. Remember the golden rule. That's very important. Most of us are believers in the golden rules. Is key. If you can look at that, that will help you. Look up to your role model, those people that you admire, that you respect. Maintain an open line of communication. Biases is what really hurt us. I set a good example and be able to provide for others. Yes, surround yourself with people of high moral standard. And I include in the book, it was a study that was done by Zenderer in 1992. And he said about 9 areas where the ethical leader must excel. He said the first one is humility. He must have concern for the greater good. He must have honesty and straightforwardness, commitment, fairness, responsibility, respect, developing people, courage to stand for what is right, no matter what it costs you. And then we also discuss the shared leadership approach. And we talk about why is it important. As you can see, that with this increased complexity, in terms of diversity, technology, one person making all the decision is almost impossible. Now we talked about the tenet of shared leadership, the respect, trust, personal accountability, effective communication, discipline. And how is shared leadership formed? You encourage openness. You create a secure environment. You promote independence, meaning autonomy. Okay, people feel confident and are skilled, they will take responsibility. They produce greater results. Power sharing, foster loyalty and respect. Involving other people, they develop their skill. Those are for more detail, you can look at the book that was sent to you and you'll have all of that. Let's talk about now servant leadership. one of my favorite topic. Okay. Am I still sharing?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Looks like, let me stop sharing, and my computer is frozen. We will finish with okay. What is servant leadership? Hmm? This was coined by Robert K. Greenleaf in 1970. And what said the great leader is seen as a servant first. And this simple fact is the key to his or her greatness. The fact that the leader choose to serve before leading. That's so powerful. And again, this was a game changer because we always have seen the leader at the top of the pyramid. Greenleaf come and invert the pyramid upside down. And the result, this theory was rejected. It was dismissed. It was only in the 1990s when we have all these ethical challenges by this organization, then they started revisiting his teaching. And he said it himself at the beginning. He said that by combining servant and leader, the intention wanted to challenge the standing assumption held about the relationship between leaders and follow, that the leaders are the top and we follow. And he inverted it. And people couldn't really fathom that this, how can a servant be the leader? You serve the leader. You're not going to be the leader. He knew the negative connotation about the word servant, but he wanted to jumpstart a new way of thinking of leadership. And this is what he said. He said, and as I ponder the fusing of servant and leader, it seemed a dangerous creation for the natural servant to become a leader. It's a danger for the leader to be served first, and danger for the follower to enter to be led by a servant. But this is why this whole thing was dismissed. He said, I did not get the notion of the servant as leader from conscious logic. Rather, it came to me as intuitive insight as I contemplated law. Now, let me briefly tell you what was, there was a book called The Journey to the East. And it's like fable, if you can use that. It's a spiritual journey where a group of people that have been part of this spiritual organization that have achieved they have reached the highest level in terms of leadership within this organization. And the time has come for this group of few that was selected to go meet, to be the word I'm using, just to be recognized. If you there's a word that I'm missing here, but they were supposed to go and to be recognized as, let's use the word of, to be the board of the spiritual gathering. And they had a server that were helping them cook, clean during the journey, because it's a long trip that took months and months. And the servant was cooking, cleaning, and he was supposed to just be a servant, the least important person in that group. And because nobody saw him as a competition, he's here to help them to do their cooking and to clean after them. They can come talk to them, talk to him time to time. And he was just the good listener, always providing, for whatever they needed, clean, cook, support them, whatever they wanted. And in the middle of the journey, the story goes that he disappeared. That cook, that least important person, because he was just the servant. Now, once he disappeared, the entire group collapsed because they have no one helping them, cleaning, cooking, talking to them, because they all consider themselves as very important figure that soon will be intronized into that organization as the new leader of that group. Because he disappeared, the entire group collapsed. Now he was perceived to be the least important thing. Now, as you can see, his disappearance showed that indeed the servant was not the least important thing. He was perhaps the most important among us. Then a couple of them were able to manage, get to the rendezvous point where they were finally going to meet the leader of that entire organization and to be acknowledged. And when they get there, and it was time for the leader of the entire organization to show up, guess who was the person? The actual servant that was cleaning after them, cooking for them. Indeed, he was the leader of the entire organization, like the CEO, coming and doing the work for everybody in that journey, and people didn't know. There's a prop said the CEO undercover. It's exactly, and he said when he was reading, he said, as I contemplated Leo, I wondered if Ghetto, can you turn off your mic? It's a gay. If you can, thank you. And it is that insight that the actual servant was indeed the leader of the organization. And he said, that's how I came with that notion and asked myself, what if the servant was the leader? And that's how he justified. But we know he's from a Christian background, the Mormon. He's a very spiritual guy. And we know that he's really been inspired by Christ, because Christ have said, I came to you as someone to serve. If you want to be first, you got to be ready to be last and to be slave to all. We all know that indeed he was really inspired by the teaching of Christ. And this is how he defined it. He said the best test is, if you want to test the servant leadership, do those who are served grow as people? Do they become, while being served, healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely to become servants themselves? And what is the effect on the less privileged in society? Will they benefit from, or at least will they not be harmed by it? This is why I did my research on servant leadership. I have not seen a model of leadership that talk about taking care of people outside of the organization. Better yet, talking about the community member. Moreover, talking about the effect of your decision on the least privileged in society. I thought when I saw this, if I wanted to find a solution for Africa, if I wanted to come with a model that can help Africa to change from having this dictator to having a leadership, a style that can not only strengthen, build people together, but leaves no one behind, I say it was servant leadership. And that's why I chose it. And I did a quantitative research, meaning that my research was not a qualitative. I collected data and did a correlational study and find a very close fit between servant leadership and organizational health, meaning that when the leaders are more servant, the organization is healthier. And that's why I wrote this book. And that's why I wanted to share it. And that's why, again, I'm biased. Of course, you said, Dr. Meng, you did the research on servant leadership. Of course, you're going to close with servant leadership. Of course, you're going to claim that servant leadership is superior. What about transformational leadership? Because for a long time, transformational leadership was viewed as the most powerful leadership model that organizations were using. But lately, there were some tests that were done. It was shown that when it's come to satisfaction, when it's come to commitment, when it's come to organizational health, servant leadership tend to have a higher impact than transformational leadership. And the simple reason is very simple. Transformational leader focus on achieving organizational goals. Sometimes they will create stress within the workforce. Sometimes they will deplete that human capital in the name of achieving organizational goal. Now, servant leadership, yes, does not ignore the organizational goal, but servant leadership is committed to strengthening the people, to making them to be servant leader, allowing them not only to contribute towards achieving organizational goal, but also be important member of their community, to help transform their community as a whole. And for us that believe in Ubuntu, I am because we are, we think that servant leadership is a critical element. And there are 4 pillars of servant leadership. It's postulated by Spears, which is one of the scholars, that take the writing of Greenleaf, Spears and Covey. They took his writing and created these 4 pillars. Service to others. They are committed to serving others. And holistic approach to work, meaning that work exists for the people, but people also need to work. Therefore, work needs to be humane. But as a person, when you do work, do it right. When you're getting paid, make sure that you do your part. Therefore, this is very holistic. Work can become even an act of worship. That do your part, work according to the norm, but also make sure that work is humane. The sharing of power in decision-making. Do not have power. Share power. Develop people. Make sure they can do the work and they can contribute, which make them feel good about themselves. But most importantly, the sense of community, the sense of belonging. This is not about the company. This is about the entire community. This is about the world. This is even about sustainability, the environment, the animal. And then he talked about this is just, that's what I have in my book. You have that in the book, this graphic about holistic approach, service to others, holistic approach to work, sharing of power, and building community. And the 10 characteristics of servant leadership. The first is listening. The servant leader spends most of his time or her time listening and listen to everything. Your voice, your body language, but even your soul. It has empathy. He can feel what you are feeling. That's how he can support you. Healing, knowing that we are broken spirit. The leader needs you. At the same time, you need him. It's not in an island. Without you, the leader is nothing. But you also need somebody to guide you. This interconnectedness, this interrelatedness, there's no superiority, there's no higher ranking. We need each other. We complement each other. There's this healing between the leader and the follower. Awareness. Understanding everything, his emotion, everything goes around him. To make sure there's properly monitored. Persuasion, they will not force themselves or their idea. They will discuss it. They will try to convince you by persuasion. They will not use their position power. Conceptualization. This leader know that sometimes you have to pivot. Sometimes you need to think through things. You need to change your thinking. You need to conceptualize. You need to come up with different systems, different methods, different approach. How do you deal with AI? Do we need to restructure? Do we need to rethink our way of doing business, even the way that we are thinking? Foresight. This leader anticipates on the future. Because if you do strategy, you can build a future without anticipating on the future. Predicting the future. Stewardship. Understanding that you are a guide. You are entrusted to this flock that you need to take to their right destination. You need to remove the obstacle. You need to strengthen them. But you are committed to the development of people. The 10th aspect is that always building community. And this gives you the 10 characteristics. And here you see the role of value in servant leadership. Value at the core of any leadership philosophy. They shape characteristics of leader, which in turn impact their activity in decision-making behavior. But you'll see there's Russell that said that. But here suggests that motivation to lead arises for any core belief system. You see, the core belief system is all about value. If you don't trust the leader, now here in the case of civil leadership, a leader's motivation derives from core egalitarian belief that they are no better than those whom they lead. Just imagine if these leaders around the world, mostly in this African continent, started to have this belief, this egalitarian belief that they are no better than those that I'm leading. I'm not entitled to this position. I'm the president. It doesn't matter. You're just another citizen. Just imagine if they look at themselves at the bottom of the pyramid, understand that they're the one that should be waking up every day, thanking their citizen by giving them these beautiful palaces, by giving them this beautiful car, by paying for their security, for them and their family, by feeding them, by clothing them. They owe us. This leader is the president of the country. It doesn't matter. We pay for your food. We pay for your clothes. We take care of your family. The least you can do is return the favor. This egalitarian belief is what makes servant leadership so powerful. And that becomes the compass for the leader. Because every day you wake up, you say, how can I support my people? How can I better satisfy my people? How can I help my people? Because my people have given me so much, rather than taking it for granted, think that you deserve it. Look at what Christ. Dorcas, can you close? Can you turn off your mic?
When they killed him.
Okay, I'll do that. Wait,
Dorcas, can you turn off your mic, please? You are interrupting.
That.
You came to my Zoom class. I should be asking who that, not you. Can you turn off your mic?
I'm trying to do that, sir.
Thank you. Now, servant leadership, if it was coined by Robert Greenleaf, it has been practiced. And in my research, I look at the Abrahamic religion and look at how Moses practiced it, how Christ practiced it, and how the Prophet Muhammad, all of them, peace be upon them, practice it. Christ said that, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Matthew 26:28. This is the teaching of Christ. If Christ considers himself as a servant, how can a president dare think that they are better than us? How could they dare look down upon us? What do they have by themselves? Whatever they have, we give it to them. And they should understand that they should be serving us, not expecting us to serve them. And for those that are Christian, I'm not teaching you anything. Christ said, if anyone wants to be first, he must be last. If you will be a servant to these people today and serve them and speak good word to them, when you enter them, they will be your servant forever. Now, in the teaching of Islamic teaching, there's a famous quote from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Peace be upon him, said that Sayyidul Khawmi Khadimuhum, the servant of the people is their leader. He also said to one of that each of you is a shepherd, and all of you are responsible for your flocks. He said to one of his collaborators, Moses bin Jamal, to make things easy and fun for the follower, to win their heart. The importance as a leader to be cordial, to be fun, to play with to have this very healthy relationship with your follower. But you come, I can't, when I live in the US for 35 years, and I see that the first time I met a guy, I was just arrived in New York and was working in a post office, putting boxes, taking the letters, separating them by zip code and put them into boxes. And then we do that in the morning. And in the evening, for those that are fast and want to work overtime, you take them and take the box, put them in the truck to be taken different places. And I saw all day, there was a guy that was wearing shoes. And I see if somebody is struggling, he will come and help you. If you see that you are very slow, he will come and, try to encourage you. And I thought that he was the supervisor. It was very normal. And he even talked to me at the time. I wasn't even speaking any English. I was, and asking me where I was from. And when we were taking the boxes to put it in the truck, he was carrying boxes. And then when we were done, I asked one of the guy, who this guy? He looked at me and smiled. He said, he's the owner of the company. I was shocked. This guy is a billionaire. He said, he's the owner of the company. He was there all day with us. I have never seen a CEO in Africa do that or behave like that. Now, when you go to the spiritual leader, it might be different. But keep in mind, supporting your follower, making things easy and fun, you will win their heart. And remember this great quote from Maya Angelou, when they said that in the end, people will not remember what you said. They will not remember what you did, but they will always remember how you make them feel. If you demonstrate compassion, love, and hope, people will remember you because you made them feel special. You made them feel important. But when you degrade people, when you insult people, you lose them forever. This is something I did in my book. I've looked at the part of servant leadership in the Abrahamic religion for both Judaism, Christian, and Islam. But let me close this discussion about servant leadership, just sharing with you what some expert on leadership said about Greenleaf servant leadership model. Everybody know one of Venice. Very powerful, one of the leader, Warren Burns, in terms of leadership. He said, I have found Greenleaf and his writing among the most original and useful, accessible and moral on the topic of leadership. This is Warren Burns that have written so many books on leadership. Now you go to Ken Blanchard. He said, I truly believe that servant leadership has never been more applicable to the world of leadership than it is today. But this last quote was blown away by someone of all respect. He wrote The 7 Habits of Successful People. This is Stephen Covey. He said, leaders are learning that this kind of empowerment, which is what servant leadership represents, is one of the key principles that, based on practice, not talk, will be the deciding point between an organization enduring success or its eventual extension. This is Dr. Stephen Covey. We all know that Stephen Covey is at the top of any teaching when it's come to management. He wrote The 7 Habits, now the 8 Habits of Successful People. I think I mentioned to you about my study. This is my research, my dissertation. It was a quantitative investigation of the relationship between servant leadership and organizations having Islamic faith-based organization, because I wanted to do it in an area where I can detect spirituality. And we used this questionnaire, the Jim Loeb Organizational Leadership Assessment Model, which says 6 areas of leadership for health organizations. First, it look at, do those leaders value people? Do they develop people? Do they build the community? Do they provide leadership? Do they share leadership? Do they display authenticity? This is the tool that I use to collect data and to come up with my I'm just gonna show you the result. I use the relationship between a Spearman rank correlation for those mathematicians among you. That's what I use. A Spearman rank correlation design was used for the investigation. And data was collected using both electronic and paper version because it was part of the COVID. I used both version and electronic. And now when we talk about correlation, you know that we're not talking about causality. We are asking ourselves, is there a relationship between these two elements? Is there an association? And what